My husband told me he cheated on me because watching me give birth to our daughter destroyed his attraction to me. He said it like he was doing me a favor by being honest. He acted like he was brave for telling the truth instead of hiding it. He said he saw things come out of me that he could not forget. He said he could not unsee it. He said I was not sexual to him anymore. He said I felt like a medical patient now, not a wife. He talked like I had changed into a different category of person in his mind. He started sleeping with his coworker Megan only a few weeks after I gave birth, while I was still bleeding, while my breast leaked milk, while I was trying to keep a newborn alive on almost no sleep. He was at her apartment. He told her how disgusted he was by what my body had become. He described me like I was ruined. When I found out, he said it was not personal. He said it was biology. He said men were not designed to witness birth. He said it triggers a protective response that kills sexual attraction. He said he researched it. I believed him for a moment because I was exhausted and shocked and still healing. Then I looked it up. There was no research. He made it up to sound scientific. So he could act like a terrible person with a clean excuse. He wanted his cruelty to sound like a fact instead of a choice. After I learned about the affair, Blake did not even try to hide it. He would text Megan right in front of me. He would leave to go to her place while I was nursing our baby. He would come back and talk about how refreshing it felt to be with someone whose body was still tight and clean. He kept telling me I should be grateful that he was being transparent instead of sneaking around. He said most men would just leave. He said he was trying to make it work. Even though he felt biologically repulsed, he turned himself into a hero in his own story. He moved me into the guest room because he said he could not sleep next to someone who reminded him of medical procedures. He described the delivery in detail and said it haunted him. He talked about the stretching, the fluids, the smell. He said he was scarred. But at the same time, he expected me to keep cooking his meals, washing his clothes, and doing all baby care because those were my duties as a mother. He treated me like a servant who should stay quiet and grateful while he insulted me and slept with someone else. Then he started bringing Megan around our friends. He introduced her like she was his emotional support during a difficult time. Megan played along. She would rub his shoulder and say Blake had been through trauma. She claimed watching birth can give men severe stress and that he needed understanding, not judgment. Our friends did not know what to say. They sat there uncomfortable because the situation was so wrong, but Blake acted so confident that it made everyone doubt their instincts. He had turned himself into the victim, and he acted like I was the one who caused his suffering. He told anyone who would listen that he had supported me through pregnancy only to be visually assaulted by the delivery. He said he was trying to rebuild his ability to feel attraction, but my postpartum body made it impossible. He complained that I did not even try to look nice anymore. I was only a few months postpartum. I was running on almost no sleep. I was covered in spit up and milk and sweat, and he wondered why I was not wearing lingerie. He acted offended that I was not performing sexy for him while I was barely surviving. He gave me gifts that were really insults: a gym membership for Mother's Day, diet pills for our anniversary, a book about winning your husband back after having a baby for my birthday. Every gift came with a speech about how he was investing in our future by helping me become attractive again. He said he was fighting for us and I needed to fight too. For a while I thought the breaking point was the cheating or the cruel comments, but the real breaking point came when I overheard him on a work call. Blake worked as a medical equipment salesman. He regularly sat in on surgeries to demonstrate products. That day, I heard him laughing with colleagues about a heart procedure he watched that morning. He joked about the blood. He joked about the chest being opened. He sounded entertained. So he was not traumatized by medical procedures at all. He was only disgusted by mine. He could watch other people bleed for work and laugh about it, but my childbirth was somehow too much for him. That was when I stopped begging and started planning. I knew his company was about to launch a new surgical device and Blake was lined up to be the lead presenter. That role would mean a big promotion and a big bonus. He had been preparing for months. The presentation would be in front of many potential buyers and all the company executives. Blake would have to demonstrate the device during a real surgery that would be broadcast on screens to the audience, and the surgery they picked was a cesarean birth. When Blake found out, he tried to get out of it. His boss said it was perfect for showing the device's precision on delicate work. His boss said refusing would cost him the promotion. The promotion would go to his competitor Ramon, who was eager to step in. So Blake practiced all week. He rehearsed a speech about the beauty of bringing life into the world. He rehearsed lines about the miracle of birth and the careful precision required in obstetric surgery. I sat there listening to him practice words about respecting the female body and honoring the sacred process of delivery. The hypocrisy was so thick it felt like smoke in the room. He had called my birth disgusting. He had cheated because of what he claimed to see, yet now he was practicing a speech full of respect and admiration like he was some kind of champion for women. On the morning of the presentation, he looked nervous but confident. He thought he had this under control. He did not know I had already called his boss's wife Jenny. I learned Jenny had also been through a traumatic birth experience. I told her everything Blake had said about my delivery. I told her how he said he was disgusted. I told her he cheated because of what he saw. Jenny was horrified. Jenny had been in the audience at past presentations, and she knew they sometimes asked personal questions. She told me she had an idea. After Blake's flawless demonstration, the question period began. Jenny stood up and spoke clearly. She said he talked beautifully about respecting the birth process. She asked if he could share any personal experience with childbirth that informed his perspective. Blake froze. Everyone stared at him. His face went pale in that moment. The entire room turned toward him waiting for an answer about his personal experience. I watched the live stream from home with our daughter on my lap, and I could see the exact second he realized he was trapped. His mouth open, but nothing came out. The surgical lights made sweat on his forehead shine like he had been running hard. The audience was silent. The executives leaned forward. Blake gripped the podium so tightly his knuckles turned pale. He finally stammered something about respecting patient privacy, and his voice cracked on the word privacy. Jenny did not let him escape. She stood fully and straightened her jacket and said her husband worked for the company too. She said she was curious how Blake balanced his beautiful speech about the miracle of birth with his actual feelings about the process. The way she said actual made people exchange glances. Blake looked even paler. He tried to laugh, but it sounded strained. His boss leaned forward with intense focus. Ramon sat nearby with a small smile and crossed his arms like he was watching his favorite show. Nobody coughed, nobody moved, the only sound was the hum of the video equipment in that large auditorium. Blake looked at his boss, then at Ramon, then back at Jenny, searching for an exit that did not exist. He tried to deflect by talking about professional boundaries, but his voice was shaking, sweat was visible. Even through the live stream, the camera zoomed in slightly, as if the operator also sensed this moment was turning into something. Jenny asked if he had children. Blake had to admit yes, he had a baby daughter. His words came out quiet. Several audience members leaned forward to hear better. Jenny nodded slowly like a lawyer who just got the answer she wanted. She asked the baby's age again, making him repeat it. The age hung in the air like a weight. She asked if he was present for the birth. Blake nodded, but did not trust his voice anymore. Then Jenny asked how that experience shaped his respect for the female body and the birth process. She reminded him how moving his presentation was. She asked what personal insight informed those beautiful words. Blake's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a fish gasping for air. The silence stretched so long it became painful. Someone in the back coughed, and Blake flinched at the sound. He could not say what he truly believed without destroying himself, but he also could not fake warmth convincingly. While cornered like this, his mind was clearly scrambling for anything safe. He finally mumbled something generic about it being educational. That word landed cold and dead. It was too clinical, too distant, too obviously fake. After speaking passionately about the miracle of birth, he answered like a detached observer. He tried to move to the next question, gesturing quickly, but the damage had already started to spread. His boss looked concerned and glanced at Jenny, then back at Blake. Audience members whispered behind their hands. A woman leaned toward her colleague and said something that made him shake his head. Ramon was openly smirking now, not even trying to hide it. The demonstration was perfect, the presentation was flawless, but this one moment of truth cracked his professional image right in front of everyone. Blake saw it happening too. His eyes were wide with panic. The presentation ended awkwardly. He rushed through the last slides without confidence. His voice stayed shaky. He forgot to thank the surgical team. He stumbled over the company name. When he finished, the applause was polite but scattered. He hurried off the stage. The camera followed him briefly, then cut to the company logo. I watched the stream end and sat still with our daughter sleeping against my chest. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Not long after Jenny called me, she sounded satisfied in a grim way. She said Blake's boss pulled him aside immediately after the whispers were brutal. She overheard potential buyers saying the exchange made them uncomfortable. One said Blake seemed like he was hiding something. Another said the gap between his speech and his answer was concerning. Jenny said Ramon stepped in during networking and smoothly handled questions Blake should have handled. Ramon made Blake look even worse by comparison. Jenny said she had never seen someone's professional reputation crack so fast. Blake came home a few hours later looking destroyed. His tie was loose, his jacket was wrinkled, his eyes were red like he had been rubbing them. He did not know I had arranged anything, so he ranted about a crazy woman who ambushed him with personal questions. He paced around the living room waving his hands. I nodded sympathetically while feeding our daughter. I asked what he said in response. My voice stayed calm and concerned like a supportive wife. Blake ran his hands through his hair and admitted he froze. He admitted he gave terrible answers. He said his boss told him the presentation content was perfect, but his question period raised concerns about his ability to handle pressure. Those were the exact words, concerns about his ability to handle pressure. He repeated them like he could not accept them. He said Ramon stepped in smoothly and answered follow-up questions with charm and confidence, and everything. Blake was not in that moment. Blake sank onto the couch and put his head in his hands. He said he did not understand why that woman targeted him. He asked what she wanted from him, and why she pushed so hard about his personal experience. I made a small sympathetic sound and suggested maybe she was just curious. Blake shook his head and said it felt personal. It felt like she knew something. Over the next days I watched him fall apart. He checked his phone constantly, refreshing his email again, and again he called colleagues asking if they heard anything about the promotion decision. His voice got tighter each time someone said they did not know. He paced around the house with his laptop open, replaying the presentation video. I heard him muttering to himself about that woman's questions. He kept asking why she targeted him and what she wanted from him. I fed the baby, changed diapers, and pretended I knew nothing. Blake barely noticed I was in the room. He was too busy trying to understand what went wrong. He replayed the question period many times. Each time he reached Jenny's question, he paused the video and stared at the screen looking for clues. Then one evening the doorbell rang and Megan walked into our house carrying takeout bags. She had never been here before. Blake always went to her apartment because he said it was easier, but that night she was in my kitchen unpacking food and rubbing his shoulders like she belonged. She told him the presentation was perfect, and that woman was probably an angry feminist trying to cause trouble. Blake nodded and leaned into her touch. I stayed in the nursery with the baby sitting in the rocking chair with the door cracked open. Their voices carried down the hall. Megan said Jenny probably had issues with men and wanted to make Blake look bad in front of his boss. Blake agreed and added that some women cannot handle seeing successful men in medical sales. They spent a long time insulting Jenny, calling her bitter and jealous. I rocked my daughter and listened to every word. Blake sounded more confident with Megan there. He said he was probably overthinking it. He said the promotion was basically his and Ramon did not have his knowledge or presentation skills. Megan kissed his cheek and told him he was right. She left later, and Blake went to bed looking more relaxed than he had in days. Then the next day came. Blake was in the living room when his phone rang. I was in the kitchen warming a bottle, but I could see him through the doorway. He answered immediately, eager and professional. Then his face changed, the color drained out of it, his shoulders slumped. He did not say much, only small sounds of agreement. When he hung up, he sat there staring at nothing for a long moment. I walked into the room with the baby. Blake looked up like he forgot I existed. He said he did not get the promotion. Ramon got it. Instead, his voice sounded flat and hollow. I asked what happened, keeping my tone supportive. Blake repeated what his boss told him. The knowledge was excellent, the presentation was perfect, but the company needed someone who could handle unexpected challenges with poise. His performance during questions showed a concerning weakness under pressure. He repeated the phrase again, concerning weakness under pressure. He said Ramon stepped in during networking and answered questions smoothly and made Blake look bad by comparison. Blake stood up and began pacing again, but now it was anger, not anxiety. He said Jenny sabotaged him. Somehow he said her question was not random. She knew exactly what to ask to make him freeze, but he could not figure out how she knew or why she did it. He never connected it to me. Why would he? His mind had already placed me in a category where I did not matter. I let him rage. He called Jenny names. He claimed she must hate men or want to push some agenda. He texted Megan, and she called back immediately, sounding sweet and sympathetic. She told him it was discrimination, and he should report Jenny. Blake agreed and said he would figure out what her problem was. When he ran out of steam, I asked quietly if we could talk about our marriage. Blake barely looked at me. He said now was not the time. He said he needed support, not more problems. I said I had been thinking about his comments about my body and the birth. I said I wanted to understand his perspective better. He waved his hand dismissively. He said we already went over this. He said his honesty should be appreciated, not analyzed. He said I should be grateful. He was transparent. Instead of lying, he said most men would have left by now. He said he was still here, still trying to make it work despite everything. I nodded slowly, then I told him I contacted Jenny. Blake's head snapped up. Finally, he was paying attention to me. I explained that I told her everything he said about being disgusted by my body after watching the birth. I told her about the affair with Megan. I told her about his claimed biological repulsion. Blake's face went pale, his mouth open, but nothing came out. I kept talking in the same calm voice. I told him Jenny did not ambush him randomly. I set it up. I researched his boss's family after I learned about the cesarean presentation. I knew Jenny had her own traumatic birth experience. I called her and told her the truth about what Blake's rising star really believed about childbirth. Blake's color returned all at once and his face turned red. He started screaming. He said I destroyed his career because I was insecure about my postpartum body. He called me vindictive and crazy. He said I ruined everything because I could not handle his honesty. I stayed calm and said I simply told the truth to someone who asked a reasonable question about the beliefs he presented publicly. He gave a speech about respecting birth and the female body. Jenny wanted to know if he had personal experience to support those words. Blake lunged toward me, his hands reaching out, his face twisted with rage. Then our daughter started crying from her bassinet across the room. The cry cut through everything. Blake stopped mid-motion with his hands still extended. He looked at the screaming baby, then at his own hands, then at me. Something shifted in his eyes. He saw what he looked like in that moment, almost getting physical with his wife while their infant cried. His hands dropped to his sides. He backed away, slowly staring at me like I was a stranger. Then he turned and walked out of the house without another word. The door closed behind him. I picked up my daughter and held her against my chest until she stopped crying. Blake did not come back that night or the next. I got one message saying he needed space to process what I did to his career. I did not respond. I spent the next days taking care of my daughter, documenting everything about his affair with Megan and researching divorce lawyers. I saved cruel texts about my body. I saved messages where he talked about being at Megan's place while I was home alone with the baby. I printed credit card statements showing charges during times he claimed he was working late. The evidence folder on my laptop grew into a thick stack of pages. On Monday morning, I called a divorce attorney's office. Her assistant gave me an appointment that afternoon. Because there was a cancellation, I brought the baby with me along with my printed folder and a timeline showing Blake's absence from parenting. The attorney's office was in a modern building with glass and clean furniture. She was in middle age with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at my sleeping baby in the carrier and offered me coffee before we started. I walked her through everything, the affair starting only a few weeks after birth, the comments about my body moving me to the guest room, the insulting gifts, bringing Megan around friends while pretending he was traumatized. The lawyer took notes and her face hardened as I spoke when I showed her messages between Blake and Megan where they talked about how gross my postpartum body was. The lawyer swore quietly. She asked if I had more documentation and I handed her the full folder. She flipped through it, slowly stopping on certain pages to read carefully. Then she looked up and said I had a very strong case. Blake admitted the affair in writing. He abandoned parenting duties, and my timeline showed he had not done night feedings or diaper changes since the baby was born. The emotional abuse was clear in his texts, and I had witnesses who heard him talk about being disgusted by my body. She said we had leverage for custody, child support, and division of assets. She said we should file fast while Blake was still off balance from losing his promotion, and before he could hide money or build a counter-story. I asked how fast we could move, and she said she could have paperwork ready by the end of the day if I wanted. I signed the retainer right there. She asked detailed questions about finances, the home, and Blake's income. One answered from memory. Because I had been managing the household since the baby was born, Blake simply deposited his paycheck and assumed I handled everything. Her assistant brought in papers for me to review and sign. The petition listed adultery, abandonment, and cruel treatment. It requested primary custody with Blake only seeing the baby under supervision until he proved parenting ability. It requested child support based on his full salary. It demanded a favorable asset split due to his fault. I filed that afternoon. The clerk stamped the papers and gave me a case number. The lawyer said the server would deliver Blake's copies. The next morning she warned me he might react badly. I went home and moved Blake's important documents to my lawyer's office for safekeeping. I changed the locks. Because the house was legally mine from before the marriage, I set up the guest room as my permanent bedroom and put Blake's clothes into large bags in the garage. Then I waited. The next morning my phone started ringing. Blake called again, and again I did not answer. He left voicemails yelling, calling me cruel and claiming I was trying to ruin his life. He called again, and the messages grew more unstable. He said I was overreacting to his honesty. He threatened to fight for custody and said his parents would say I was unfit. The final message was only heavy breathing before he hung up. My lawyer called later and said Blake's lawyer contacted her. She sent them a letter outlining our evidence, the text, the credit card statements, the timeline of his absence, the witness statements. She said Blake's lawyer sounded surprised by how much proof we had. They probably expected me to file without details so they could bully me into less. Then Blake's mother called me. She started by saying boys will be boys and men struggle with fidelity. Sometimes she told me I should be understanding of Blake's needs and stop trying to punish him. She said I was being too harsh by filing for divorce instead of working it out. Then Blake's father joined the call and suggested counseling. He mentioned a religious counselor who helps couples move past infidelity. He said they could have Blake back home soon if I dropped the divorce and agreed to work on the marriage. I took a breath and told them the truth. Their son cheated only weeks after I gave birth. While I was bleeding and exhausted, he told me watching childbirth ruined his attraction, and he could not sleep in the same room with me. He had not changed diapers or done night feedings. He gave me diet pills and insulting gifts. He brought his girlfriend around friends while claiming he was traumatized even though he watched surgeries for work without any problem. The line went quiet. Then Blake's father said they would call back later, and ended the call. They did not call back. Later, Jenny texted me with updates from Blake's workplace. Gossip was spreading fast. People were connecting. They heard about the awkward question moment, and they heard Blake was staying at Megan's apartment. The office was piecing together the story that he cheated on his postpartum wife, got publicly exposed for hypocrisy, lost his promotion, and then his wife filed for divorce. Jenny said his reputation was collapsing because people talk, and once they talk, the story grows legs. Soon after, Jenny called and said she saw Megan at work, and Megan looked miserable. Megan had thought she was getting a successful rising executive with a bright future. Instead, she got a man who lost his promotion, faced divorce, and would owe serious child support. Jenny said Megan had become cold toward Blake and stopped acting like a supportive partner. Then Blake showed up at my house with flowers and apologies. He looked tired. I watched him through the window and decided to hear him out. I opened the door but did not let him in. He rushed into excuses. He said stress made him say things he did not mean. He said the presentation disaster messed with his head, and he took it out on me. He said he wanted to fix the marriage and be a real father. He held out the flowers like they erased months of betrayal. I took them and set them aside without looking. Then I told him he could come in and see the baby. He sat on the floor and held our daughter carefully. She did not cry, which surprised me. He spoke softly to her. I pulled out my phone and recorded video. He did not notice because he was focused on the baby. I let him hold her for a few minutes so the camera could capture the moment. Then I asked him directly if he was still attracted to me, or if watching the birth permanently changed that like he claimed before. Blake looked up and hesitated too long. He was trying to guess what answer I wanted, but he could not fake it fast enough. His eyes dropped back to the baby. That pause told me everything. He was still disgusted. He was still not attracted. He was only here because losing his promotion and facing divorce forced him to face consequences. He finally admitted he was trying to do the right thing even though the attraction issue was real for him. He said therapy might help, and there were specialists for men who develop aversions after witnessing birth. He said he would try if it meant saving the marriage and being there for our daughter. He looked at me like he expected forgiveness, but what I saw was desperation and damage control. I thanked him for his honesty and told him the divorce would proceed as planned. I said I would agree to reasonable custody if he committed to real parenting, not showing up only when it helped his image. He tried to argue, but I took the baby from his arms and told him to leave. He left without more words. The video stayed on my phone showing him holding his daughter while hesitating when asked if he could ever want me again. Soon after, my lawyer called to schedule our next meeting. Blake's lawyer had sent a custody proposal demanding equal custody. Immediately, my lawyer sounded annoyed. She said they were trying to scare me into accepting less support by threatening a custody battle. I brought all my records to her office, every message about Megan, every missed doctor appointment, every night feeding I did alone, every note showing Blake chose his girlfriend over his child. My lawyer spread the papers on her desk and said this was exactly what we needed. Judges look at patterns, not sudden performances. After divorce papers, Blake had months of absence and my documentation proved it. We countered with supervised visits at first and possible overnights later, only after Blake proved consistency and competence. At the meeting, Blake's lawyer tried friendly talk, but my lawyer shut it down and presented the counter offer: supervised visits twice a week for a set time, and no overnights until Blake completed parenting classes and showed consistent care for months. Blake exploded and accused me of using the baby as a weapon. His lawyer tried to calm him. My lawyer slid the evidence across the table: messages where Blake told Megan he could not stand being around the baby because she reminded him of my postpartum body receipts showing he spent evenings with Megan while claiming work logs showing I handled almost all care. Blake's lawyer read and his face changed. He asked Blake if the messages were real. Blake claimed I took them out of context and he was only venting about normal stress. My lawyer pointed out that normal stress does not include telling an affair partner that your wife's postpartum body makes you sick. Blake's lawyer asked for a break. They left the room. My lawyer and I sat quietly. When they returned, Blake's lawyer came back first and said his client would accept supervised visitation as a starting point. He wanted it stated. He agreed voluntarily without admitting wrongdoing. My lawyer agreed. Blake came back looking defeated and signed but would not look at me. Later, the child support calculations arrived. The amount was larger than I expected. My lawyer explained Blake's salary placed him in a higher bracket, and since I was not employed while caring for an infant, the guidelines required substantial support. Blake called my lawyer's office within an hour of receiving his copy. He screamed that it was unfair and accused me of trying to destroy him financially. My lawyer calmly said the numbers came from state guidelines using his reported income. If he believed it was wrong, he could provide proof of changed circumstances. Blake argued his career prospects were damaged because of what I did. He complained he should have had the promotion and higher pay, but now he was stuck and his reputation was ruined. My lawyer snapped back that Blake damaged his own career by cheating on his postpartum wife and then failing to handle a simple question about childbirth during a professional presentation. No judge would lower support because a man faced professional consequences for personal choices. Blake's lawyer cut him off and said they would respond through proper channels. My lawyer ended the call. I sat there feeling a strange satisfaction. Blake wanted to punish me for exposing his hypocrisy. Now he was learning that actions have consequences in money and law, not just feelings. After that, Jenny told me Megan broke up with Blake. Megan had thought she was getting a successful man with a bright future. Instead, she got a man with a lost promotion, a messy divorce, and serious child support. She was no longer excited to play supportive girlfriend. Blake ended up alone in an apartment after I filed for divorce. I felt satisfaction, but also emptiness because none of this gave me back the months he stole from my early motherhood. When supervised visits began, a professional supervisor watched Blake interact with the baby. He was awkward, but he needed instruction on simple infant care, but he listened and followed guidance. The supervisor noted he needed education but showed willingness. I began therapy soon after. I told the therapist everything: the affair, the insults, the revenge, the divorce, the custody battle. She said my anger was justified, but she also told me I had to rebuild my identity beyond being the wronged wife. The revenge felt good, but it could not become my whole life. Over time, I built a support system. Jenny became a real friend. I met with her for coffee, and we talked about motherhood, betrayal, recovery, and the strange culture of the medical sales world. Blake continued visits and slowly improved. He enrolled in parenting classes and practiced what he learned. I watched with mixed feelings. I was glad he was stepping up for our daughter, but I hated that it took consequences to push him there. Eventually, settlement negotiations moved forward, and my lawyer got me a favorable split of assets and a custody plan that prioritized stability and safety. Blake agreed through his lawyer with very little fight, because he likely did not want a public trial where his messages would become part of the record. Over time, my life became less about Blake and more about rebuilding. I searched for work that could fit around naps and night feedings. I found flexible part-time work and felt my mind waking up again. I considered dating not because I needed a man, but because I wanted to remember I was still a person outside of motherhood and betrayal. Blake wrote a letter later apologizing and claiming therapy helped him admit the real issue was his fear and selfishness, not childbirth. I read it more than once, but I did not respond. Words could not erase what he did. As my daughter grew, Blake became more capable as a father, and the visitation plan changed to reflect that I allowed unsupervised visits when it was safe because my daughter deserved a father who showed up even if I would never be okay with him again. I kept building a life with new friends, therapy, work, and goals. I worked on seeing my postpartum body through my own eyes, not his. I learned to describe my body as strong and capable because it carried and delivered a healthy child. When I looked back at everything, I realized his cruelty could have broken me. Instead, it forced me to find a backbone. I did not know I exposed his hypocrisy in front of the people who mattered to his career. I filed for divorce and protected my child. I built a new life with real support. He tried to make me feel disgusting and worthless. He failed. I looked at my daughter and understood something simple and powerful. She would grow up watching her mother be strong, and that mattered more than any revenge.